Welcome to another episode of Leadership Synergized. I am so pleased and very much humbled by Coach Patrick Rady, who's taken the time to join us for a second episode. Hopefully you've had a chance, and if you haven't, you can check out our Still Kevin YouTube channel and pick up a recording of Coach Patrick Rady's comments about education, his experiences, and how he learned typing led him to become the person he is today, where he could have been a physical education teacher. Coach Rady, thank you so much. We had a lot in common with the typing piece. I'm sure you passed the 100 or 200 words per minute piece. I think I got to 72, but I had like 25 errors or something. So that kind of held me back quite a bit. My hands have never worked the way that others thought they should in the mechanical sense.
I think I got the 90 that I needed with so many errors to get that B. And like we talked about the grading scale there, I got what I needed, but I was pretty good at it. And I was quick enough that I could challenge kids. If they beat me in typing without any skill, then they would get an automatic A for the semester. I was able to stay undefeated there.
I love the guests that bring back memories. As you were talking, I remember the intro to the old Angela Lansbury show, Murder, She Wrote.
Oh.
And it's kind of like typing in a Peck piece. Well, that was always me in the very old typewriter piece, but that's perfect. Coach, let's talk a little bit. You spent a number of years, 29 years as an educator. You coach with your father. You grew up with your father coaching. You've had a lot of opportunity to be around leaders and to be impacted with leadership. Talk about, when was the first time you really recognized that this thing called leadership, this is something that's formal and something that can, quite frankly, change your world, but change the world around you?
Yeah, I think all through college and coaching, and you get into your job and what is a leader? Is it a title? Is it a person? You've got this title and you've got these people that you're supposed to lead and to make a difference in. I didn't really understand leadership as far as like the technical aspect until I went and earned my MBA at Indiana Wesleyan. And Indiana Wesleyan is big on servant leadership. And the Maxwell leadership books that they were big with then. And it was then I realized, okay, I've always kind of been a servant leader. A lot of people will say they're a player's coach or whatever. I really think, and I don't know if that's necessarily the right term, because some people think, okay, well, they just let the players run the show. I think when they say they're a player's coach, I think a lot of times those guys are servant leaders. They will serve their students. They will serve their employees. And I think the best example is Jesus Christ was a leader. He was a manager. I mean, when you look at the Bible is the best leadership book we can get. When you talk about dealing with people, we talk about knowing when to the forgiveness, just how to speak, ethics. I mean, it covers everything, right? And so when I started looking at leadership from a Bible standpoint, I realized that I could have been a better leader than I was, but definitely my leadership style has been one of as a servant leader. And if Jesus can wash feet, don't you think that the rest of us should be able to help with our employees or our players or whatever, as far as it's not always about them. Like if I see a need, I'll feel a need, I'll grab basketballs and put it on there, or I'll do the laundry, whatever it needs to take. And I think that's really important in today, especially when we look at the world we live in. I think a lot of times it's because we've gotten away from, I personally think, leading from the Bible. I think a lot of our principles early on in the United States, everything was built on biblical principles and how you treated people and but still the Bible still talks about discipline. And so for me, it was really when I took that class at Indiana Wesleyan in the mid 2000s that I realized that, okay, my leadership style is one of servant leaders. And two, what that looked like and what leading from a biblical standpoint. And many times I failed, whether it be just with my actions or something, and I would feel bad or whatever. And I might go back the next day and tell a player, hey, I don't really like how I responded to you, but this is why I'm doing this here, but please forgive me for maybe the tone and tenor that I had at the time. Or it might be with a student. And I think that we all have bad days. We all have situations where, but I think at the same time, the Bible tells us about repentance. And I think it's humbling sometimes. Sometimes you got to admit you were wrong. And the decision you made was not right. But I think at the end of the day, those employees care about you a little bit more. And they want to work for you a little bit harder when you show you're human and you admit maybe mistake that you made, you didn't just blame them. So I guess that's my first kind of, taste with really understanding leadership was that MBA class, and how much more there is to leadership than just having a title.
Thank you for sharing that, Coach. As I'm listening to you speak, it comes back to me. We mentioned Coach John Wooden early on with the first episode, being quick but not hurrying. Coach Wooden also would tell his players one of the first early get-togethers of the season, which back then, the seasons were much more controlled, right? When you could have contact and couldn't, but back then in the 50s, 60s, et cetera. But he was very clear to let them know that I'm going to love you all the same. I'm not going to like you all the same. To your point with Jesus, the example set, he held people accountable. He held himself accountable. And as I think about the transition I made after nearly 24 years in a business environment in 2008, 2009, I think about applying and interviewing for hundreds of jobs, not getting responses for most of them. But I also think about driving 5 hours for a 40-minute interview and driving 5 hours back from Southern Indiana to the northern part of the state and setting in on an interview and having 4 or 5 lifelong educators coach me that if you're hired for this role and if you don't know something, you need to fake it. And oh, by the way, if you're hired, you're not being hired as their friend. So on my drive back, that 5-hour window, plenty of time to think, right? Because I don't sing that well. So even when I'm alone, I try not to sing because I'm going to run myself maybe off the road or really, excuse me, drag out the trip. But I really told myself 2 things. Number one, I don't want to be an educator to be their enemy. Excuse me. So that told me I had to be honest with them and upfront. And that really gets into your point, excuse me, Coach, on being a servant leader. You got to be able to admit you're no better than anyone else in life and come alongside.
Yeah, you're right. And I think when they see you roll up your sleeves and get after it, I think there's a respect there. And I'm not talking about as a coach just going out and playing with them. I'm talking about they see that you are putting time into scouting, that you maybe take special time and have different drills or whatever, and you're trying to develop each player differently. So you realize that there are differences in their skill level, but you're trying to build them up to be the best versions that they can be. And I think when you talk about John Wooden, that was probably my dad's guy that he looked up to as far as and he had a lot of the same philosophies as Wooden, had read his books and so on. And so I would say there's definitely a Wooden impact on me. For me, the guy was probably Lou Holtz. His rules: do what's right, do the best you can, and treat others how you want to be treated. Those have been my classroom rules. And I can remember the first time I had one of the administrators come in, they said, "That's it?" I'm like, okay, well, do what's right. Okay, now is it right to use profanity? I think they know that, right? Is it right to run in the class? Do I have to list 35 things? Do what's right. do the best you can. You do the best you can. If you don't have your textbook, if you don't have your pencil, he's like, well, yeah, you're right. And treat the other. So do we really want to be called names? Do we really? And the more he's thinking, I'm like, well, you just made it simple. I'm like, that's the whole purpose. Because I can't memorize 30, let alone as a 16-year-old kid going to be able to memorize 30 of them. But I know 3 of them. I know, hey, is that really the right thing to do? No, it's not. Okay. So Lou Holtz was definitely one of the coaches that I would read or I would watch some of his speeches, and had a major impact on how I in my leadership style, besides my father.
Coach, when I think of the S in the still model of leadership that you and I have talked about off camera a few times, I really admire the manner of which you lay out your heart. You cover the first L, which is love, with everything you do, and it's in your track record of success, whether it's as a person, a child of Christ, as a child of your natural parents, as a coach, as a husband, as a father. It's evident there. But I'm sure there's been challenges brought to you in that regard. In particular, when you think about how can you raise the bar? And I know you're one who's always considered, how can I raise the bar on the value I can bring for others? What have you found that's worked for you in being able to bring more value to Patrick Rady, so you're bringing more value to those around you?
I think transparency. I think they need to see that you have some skin in the game, so to speak, that you care. And to go back to Lou Holtz, and one of the things that he always said, that there are 3 universal questions that everybody has of one another. Do you care about me? That's the love factor there, right? Are you committed are you committed in this relationship that we're in, as far as whether, and so I've always kind of looked at that. Do you care about me? Are you committed? And then the last one, can I trust you? And I've always wanted to be where somebody can answer those 3 things. He cares deeply about me, to he's committed. And that might mean I have to learn something else. That might mean I have to stay up to date with things or whatever. So I'm showing a commitment that I'm willing to broaden my horizons, sharpen my saw, so to speak. Oh. And then 3, that universal question we all want to know, right? Can I trust you? Well, because as they talk about, it's easy to tear down things. It's easy to tear down a building. It's easy. And when things are torn down, it takes a long time to build them back up. And trust, if it's violated, if it's broken, it can be very difficult to build that trust again. So I think that's where then the transparency comes in. Can they trust you? And so I think they've got to know that you have their best interest in for them. So those are the 3 things. Do you care about me? Are you committed? And can I trust you?
Well stated, Coach. And as leaders, any one of us, whether it's just as a parent, and I shouldn't say just as, it's one of the most important roles all of us may have an opportunity to have on this earth. But as a leader, there are so many opportunities for us out there to build trust or to lose trust. I know that I have set teams back that I've been responsible for, whether it's as a follower, as a leader, as a team member coming alongside, perhaps by not participating as much as they needed to have me participate, maybe through poor decision making. As I've reached this part of my life, the great thing that God has graced me with is a clearing of the fog of past decisions and why things have worked the way they did previously. Maybe they didn't go as well as I thought they should have been. I now see why and understand. Vice versa for things I never thought would work, and wow. And those times came that did work the best when I just got out of God's way and let it happen. But I also recall being in school, middle school, high school, and the teachers telling us as class members, you don't want to live a life and then have regrets at the end. But as I reflect back now with that fog gone, Coach, I don't know how a person doesn't have regrets or things they would like to be able to go do again, but it's important that we don't let that bury us because we can't go back. We take that learning and we move forward from today. But for you, what's something that maybe as you reflect back on, as you look back on in your career, in your life, whether it's your development, your role as a leader, as a follower, that you could bring advice to those who may be just starting out in this leadership aspect that we're discussing and they're building their toolbox? Something, if you had to do over today, knowing what you know today, that you would guide them maybe to consider your experience and learning.
I think I would advise them to take bits and pieces from everything they learn, but realize that it's only that you need to develop your style. I was a big Bobby Knight fan. I loved how he coached and was fortunate to be able to get into his practices and watch, and then you'd sit there and watch how he would talk to referees and stuff like that. And my dad was not on, he was like Coach Knight in a sense, not the language or anything like that, but I respected both of them, admired both of them. And my relationship with referees was not very good at an early age. I would tell you that what they say, you catch more bees with honey than whatever, or what, I don't know. I don't know what flies with honey or than vinegar. I don't know. I can't remember what that old saying my dad used to say, but that's going to turn people off from a coaching standpoint, from a leadership standpoint there. Be who you take the advice you get from people, but be your own person. Develop your own philosophy with those things included. As I told you, Lou Holtz was a big impact on me. My dad. So I've gotten to the point now where I've melted like a lot of these different things. But early on, you'd look and okay, is this kind of how you act when you coach? And do you have this? No, just be yourself. Just be yourself. And that's definitely one of the things that I look back now and I see that you develop that and just be yourself. And I think that you will have less regrets. Also, I think the second thing is be where your feet's at. So be conscious where you're at. Make that the best place that it can be. And I think too many times we worry about, okay, I look back, I wanted to be a head basketball coach. That was my goal. I was young. But take time, if you're an assistant coach, serve that coach and serve those players just like you are a head coach. Be loyal and those kind of things. And don't wish you were somewhere else. Because as we said, you can't go back and get that time. I felt I was loyal and everything. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I missed out on some enjoyment because I wanted to be a head coach. And there's nothing wrong with having that goal of wanting to be this leader, but be where your feet are at. Give that 100% of your time and attention and not wish, where you're at away. And then thirdly, I would say, when I say be where your feet's at too, you got to be willing to tell people, no, I don't have the time. You got to be honest. I've got so much going on. You can't tell everyone yes. And I learned the hard way that I tried to be everything to and I wasn't giving the best effort that Patrick Rady could give. And the problem was it started at home. That's where my best effort should have been. That's where my leadership concentration should have been, at home as a husband and as a father. So when you try to do too many things, I think you have to be able to tell some people, no, this is just not the right time. Hey, I'm really admire that you would ask me to do this, but I can't give you 100% effort. And I think that's a big one for me, because I hate to disappoint people. As I said, I'm a servant leader. I hate to tell people no. I hate to But I think in the long run, you put more inner stress on yourself if you try to do everything. So
Well said, Coach. Aligned with the typewriting memory, you brought back a lot of my regrets in that aspect as well in similar fashion. But in particular, several things jumped out at me, but just one thing I want to just build on just briefly. When you talk about being where your feet's at, John Maxwell talks about before you can become a leader, a successful and effective leader, you must first be an effective and successful follower. And too many times, and I've done the same thing, made mistakes in trying to rush where I'm at to where I wanted to go. Reality was, I didn't take the highway or the sidewalk that led me directly there. It took me, it may have been what felt like a shortcut at the moment, but it ended up being the longest route from point A to point B, right? And we're always taught you want the shortest, most direct route. Wasn't what I chose. But when I hear you talk about being where your feet's at, when we're not where our feet's at, we miss out on opportunities to grow and learn from the people closest to us, around us, through just general conversations like you and I have had in this hour plus in recording these 2 episodes. But I can recall just looking back, think about lost value because I wasn't where my feet was at in the moment.
absolutely. And you take that into life. You think about how many great people that we have had the privilege to work for. Life's short. They're not around anymore. Did we get everything we got? And my wife, her mom, my mother-in-law was just a fantastic cook. And she would tell me, like, I wish I would have asked her this. I wish, and she had early onset dementia, and there was just nothing that you could really plan for. But just hearing her, like, I wish I would have asked this. I wish I would have. You think about that, and it's not. So sometimes we don't intentionally not be where our feet's at, but we just think if that's what I could tell young people, man. Just be where your feet's at and absorb everything you can. Sometimes you can also learn what not to do from different things, but yeah, be where your feet's at.
I love it. I love it. Well, Coach, as we head down the home stretch of your time with Leadership Synergized, and I want to bring you back because you've hit upon so many topics we've not had a chance to get into, but I want to schedule you for the future and a future episode. You have so much value to bring. And again, you model the still model of leadership as well as anyone I think I've met in my lifetime, and I commend you for that. But talk a little bit about what's up with Coach Patrick Rady. You may not be coaching, but you've got your own podcast that you're out there with. Talk about that a little bit of where our listeners or viewers may be able to catch you and get a little bit of basketball plus.
Yes, basketball plus. So one of the things that I've always wanted to do, and my wife was telling me, she would tell me after the Saturday morning coaches show, go in there and she'd say, I think you have a radio voice. Maybe you ought to do a podcast. When I decided to get out of coaching, I'm like, okay, well, obviously, what are my passions? Think about basketball, and you're thinking basketball. And I have, over the last 7 or 8 years, kind of developed a little taste for bourbon. And in a sense, like some people would wine. I've been to probably 10 or 12 distillery tours. I love the history lesson of it. I love I like history. And so I have been able to combine my passions. It's Basketball and Bourbon Podcast. You can get it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Podbean. And so I have just kind of started, and I sent out just mass emails, kind of like you have done. And I've been fortunate. I've had some really great basketball people that have been a part of my podcast. And I've also had some interesting people in the bourbon industry that have been able to allow people to have knowledge. And my dad loves it. He's never taken a drink of his life. And I think he said when he was sick, my grandpa would give him a hot toddy, or back in the day when you probably didn't have the 24-hour Medicare
medicine
clinic
from the golden days.
Yeah. So, but it's gone over pretty well. I've taken a little bit of time. I haven't put together as many as late. As you know, I'm also doing the IT with the Hoosier Basketball Coaches Association, and the spring's a big month or months for us as far as helping recognize the athletes, the basketball players, boys and girls in Southern Indiana, as well as putting on one of the best high school all-star games there is in the state of Indiana. So I'm looking to ramp it up this summer and get back going. I got some interesting people that I've been able to meet at some different distilleries, and they're going to be a part of it, and some different basketball guys. So you can follow us there. You can jump on there, and we would love for you to go take a listen.
Coach, that's fantastic. And I would encourage anyone to take a listen. I've had a chance to listen to some of your podcasts. It's just simply outstanding. And what a unique way to bring, for lack of a better term, two unique segments of our society together in that regard. And you talk about building critical thinking. For a guy like me, that's building critical thinking, putting the two B's together, bourbon and basketball, in that aspect. So I appreciate that. And Coach, I appreciate your heart for Jesus. I appreciate your heart for serving, and what you do for the nonprofit of the Hoosier Basketball Coaches Association is just so awesome. And thank you for that. And thank you for what you represent and how you represent it for each and every child and each and every person blessed to have come onto your path in God's purpose in your life.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and thank you for having myself on Leadership Synergized in the first year of your podcast. And I enjoy listening to yours as well. I don't always get to watch it, but definitely when I'm traveling, I do more listening. But you can always get something from one of your podcasts. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. So because each leader's unique, there's really, like, as I said, don't want to be the same person, but it's like our fingerprints and DNA. Leaders are different. They're unique, and you can always learn something from somebody. And I think now ever more, besides reading, and you can have all this at the tips of your fingers. And so thank you for what you're doing, because there's a generation out there that we don't want to see fail. And we can always say, well, our generation's better or this or that, but we want to hand the torch. And I think you're doing a great job of handing the torch over to the next generation of leaders and giving them something to work on. And for that, I salute you.
Well, you're very kind. I think too kind, but I appreciate your kind words, and I hope our viewers have an opportunity to take something away from what you have paid it forward with through our two episodes together, Coach. And to your point, too many times I missed out on those opportunities because of my mindset, my selfishness, my looking too far into the future without understanding it step by step, instead of hopping, so to speak, or flying high like George Jetson used to with his dog Astro back in the cartoon days. But wow, this generational aspect we have today, there's so many positive things there, but yet an opportunity to pay it forward through the body of work, such as you presented, your father's presented, Coach Wooden presented, Coach Holtz has presented, is so astonishing when you think about the dynamics that can be brought together there. I thank you, and I'm humbled by your kind words, and I'm humbled by your time for our viewers and our listeners, Coach. God bless you. Can't wait to get you back on in the near future, my friend. Have a wonderful day and remainder of the week.
You do the same. Anytime for you.
And for those of you that had the opportunity to hear from Coach Patrick Rady, I think you'll agree. This is leadership from the heart, in the heart, through the heart, at its finest. Don't forget to lead, be quick, don't hurry, as Coach Wooden told his players. And at times, it's most important to just be still. Thank you for joining us. God bless you. I appreciate you so much.